Good morning, everybody. An early Merry Christmas. We have lots of things happening today, exciting things. And so on this cold, crisp morning, and the air smells like northern air. There's a different smell, there's a different feel to cold Arctic air. Definitely we are feeling it this morning. But you trudged through, you made it, your car started, and you're here today. And so welcome to the sanctuary. Let's start with prayer. Lord, you're good to us. I thank you so much for gathering together of people here, that we have fellowship one with another. We're going to hear from your word. Today is going to be a joyous day of remembrance. People are going to share their skills and talents in singing and music. And we don't take those things for granted, Lord. We just thank you for all your beautiful blessings. In Jesus' name, amen. So Leanne very nicely introduced this particular quarter on King David. And so she set the stage last week with her lessons and teaching about David and his start and what special role that he plays in certainly the storyboard of God's timeline for us. As you break down the story of David, I'm jumping into the second lesson. And that second lesson finds David, he's already been anointed. So Samuel came out to the farmstead and found the young man tending his sheep, said, call him in. And so David's already been anointed. He's already killed Goliath, so he's done that already. And he's just now starting to serve in Saul's cabinet, so to speak. And he's been called upon to start playing music. He's been called upon to be an armor bearer. And we see Saul beginning to get jealous. There's some rumblings about David. Saul has killed 1,000, and David's killed 10,000. And he's starting to see the tea leaves. His kingdom is in jeopardy. God isn't there for him anymore. And so he's starting to get jealous. So we're going to pick up the stage where David is just in that place, and we're going to end just about where David is anointed the second time. Saul is going to be killed in battle tragically. It's a sorrowful thing for David, but he hasn't quite yet ascended to full kingship, so to speak. He's in this waiting period. He's in this period between. He's got the promise, but he's got to go through some things to finally get to where God promised him. And so this brings in to play this idea of covenant and this idea that God makes promises. And when he makes a promise, you can take it to the bank. God isn't flippant with what he says. He says what he means, and he means what he says. And so for us, when we think about David, we can think of David's story as a reminder for us that God is faithful in keeping his promises. It also illustrates that while God will fulfill his promise to us, it doesn't always happen the way we think it should, or in the timing that we think it should. Because David, when he was given the promise, back in just outside of the sheep pen, oil from head to toe, you're going to be king. He didn't just jump right into Kingship 101. And then third, it's going to give us an example of what one man endured while he was waiting to realize his promise. And it serves as a model for us to think about how we might respond to events in our life. Because each of us, I'm sure, God has talked to us and given us promises. But some of those might not be fulfilled yet. And so David teaches us some things. By reading David's story, we can learn how we might be able to act and respond and faced with our own life situations. So we know that David was anointed by Samuel to be the next king, but it was about 15 years before he actually assumed that position. And during that waiting period, God wasn't stagnant. He was working a plan in God's life, in David's life, and preparing him to become that king. And while it may not have seemed like it, that delay probably was for his own good. And so there's an old commercial, it was a ketchup commercial, and you'd see this commercial where this ketchup is running like really slow, and there's a little kid watching it, and in the background there's the song, "Anticipation, it's keeping me waiting." Anybody connect with that song? You remember what there it is, yeah. Old school, all right. Well, how good are you at waiting? I mean, are you like, I need to know now? Or like, is there that Christmas present that's just sitting under the tree right now, and you're the one that's gonna go rattle it and maybe even dig into it when mom and dad are gone? Or are you one of those people that are just kind of set back? It'll happen. Christmas will get here soon enough. There'll be place for it, right? I'm not asking you to convict yourself, but I'm guessing that some of you folks you're gonna rattle that present. You want it now. And so for some of us that might get in that situation, I think David's gonna give us some good insights. So what was probably very frustrating for David was he had some initial success. I mean, dude, Samuel came to his house, picked him from all his brothers. It said, "David, you're the one," and he anointed him with oil. His family saw it. I mean, that's recognition. I mean, he killed, success in killing the lions and the bears. I mean, that was like, he was king of the field there in the sheep pen. Ain't nobody gonna be messing with David's sheep, all right? He could take care of himself. He could take care of those sheep. He was asked to play in the king's presence just for the king. Now, how many musicians are given that responsibility? I mean, that's success. And so when you experience early success like this and things are going, and the next thing you know, the Bible says, read this, when Saul realized, this is in 1 Samuel 18, verses 28, 29. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became still more afraid of him, and he remained his enemy the rest of his days. David's boss, his leader, didn't trust him. He was organizing, like, imagine coming to church. Brother Bland, I love you. Where are you at? He's not here. Brother Bland has already talked about several folks because you come into church and you're targeted. All right, the whole system's against you. And so Saul has motivated his kingdom. He's talked to people in authority, watch out for David. Even though David's been very trustworthy, he's got the whole realm against David. Now, think about you at the workplace, you in your family, misunderstood, probably mischaracterized. Those kind of things can be very, very, not only depressing, but it can really make you want to lash out. It could make you want to quit. And for some people, it's just the opposite. It makes them want to fight and lash out. He's gonna confront directly. And again, I don't know how you handle being misaligned, but it's not comfortable. And so David's in a situation where his character is being called into account. And so on two different occasions, while David was playing that lyre for Saul, this isn't like, I'm just mildly displeased with your performance, David. Here's what Saul says, While he was playing, as he usually did, Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled that spear. It wasn't like a little poke. He hurled this spear, and he says to himself, I'm going to pin David to the wall. All right, and David eluded him 2 times. So he's playing his harp. I don't know who's playing guitar today. And Saul takes, and he just chucks it at him. And the second time he does it, it says, as Saul drove the spear into the wall. So it was not like a little poke. This was like serious stuff. So David, finally, he said, David made good his escape. And that was in 1 Samuel 18, chapter 19, verses 9 and 10. So there wasn't just a little displeasure. And David probably didn't even realize fully what was going on and why Saul was acting that way. In fact, time and time again, David would show himself to Saul, and he prostrated himself, submitting himself to Saul. And I'm sure that David was a little bit confused. This is his leader. This is the man that God put up. Saul himself was a good-looking man, head and shoulders above everyone else. So what can we learn by studying David and his interactions with Saul? Well, I've got 5 ideas, and let's make sure. I think I should be able to get through them. And one of those ideas, point number 1, is sometimes waiting isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you might think you want it, but the reality is you don't. You don't want it. And so why do I say that? There's this idea of delayed gratification. And people, if you can list me a successful person, however you define success, I guarantee one of the attributes that you're going to describe about this person is something related to delayed gratification. If somebody really wants, Brother Scott, love him, to get to his missionary work where his heart and soul was, Brother Scott had to endure several times, I'm sure, deputation. In other words, I'm going to go through this knowing it's going to allow me to do this. It's a form of delayed gratification. When you watch somebody like Jeremy Hoffey, I don't know how he does it. He's just back there playing the keys. He didn't just wake up knowing how to play keys. I would guarantee you there's some practice in the wheelhouse back there where he delayed gratification before, so he could do that. He invested in this so he could do that. Take it in the financial realm. People that know anything about investing, you put your money in now and you leave it and you wait for it, and little hiccups come up in life, but if you're patient and disciplined and you leave it there, there's a good chance at the end of your 30, 40 years, that little bit that you put in is going to grow and accomplish something. So this idea of delayed gratification is usually wound up in this idea of having to wait. And there is an example of a study that was done in Stanford back in the 70s. And since it's been referenced time and time again. So if you Google marshmallow study, it's going to reference it. Now, since the 70s, there's been a lot of other studies that have done to either verify it or debunk it. And it's not as strong as it once was, but it does illustrate a point. Because there's other factors that go into delayed gratification other than what this study pointed out. So there are limits to this study, but it does point to a good example. What the researchers did is they had these little kids and they put them in a room and they said, look, I'm going to give you a marshmallow. You can have this one marshmallow now, or if you can wait 15 minutes, you're going to get 2. And then they followed those kids that waited for the 2 marshmallows. And they looked at their life. And they found out things like they scored higher on some of their cognitive tests. They had their health, their body mass index was more in tune with what it should be. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, full confession. Last night I pulled out the snacks and it was like 10 o'clock at night. And I really didn't want to, but I really wanted to. So I didn't delay the gratification. I had the snack, all right? Well, you can imagine somebody that can delay gratification. They want their health and well-being over that. It was a good snack, okay? It was a good snack. That's all I'm going to say, right? This idea of delayed gratification is not only a principle of successful people, I also believe it's biblical. We are waiting for our reward. God's created a place for us, a mansion, all right? And we're not doing it to necessarily, we're not living this life just for the rewards, but there is a reward and there is a joy that comes in working in the kingdom. So with that being said, there has been studies as well, like the American Psychological Association, that talks about, and I put this in here for Brother Bland, but he's not even in here. I'm going to mention the prefrontal, oh, there you are. The prefrontal cortex. I figured you'd like that word. The prefrontal cortex, it's the part of the brain that's responsible for reasoning, planning, and self-control. That's really where this delayed gratification takes place. And individuals who regularly resist the lure of immediate rewards, they tend to have stronger emotional regulation and decision-making skills, which long-term contributes to a happier life and more satisfaction. And so don't interpret waiting, like not getting what you think God has told you, as a bad thing, because you might be developing this character trait of delayed gratification, as well as there's other areas in your life that God might be wanting to develop. For example, what do you think God was working in David during his long wait? All right, David, you're a farm boy. I know you took care of the lion and the bear, and you did run roughshod over some of that, that big ram that got angry. You probably put him down too, and maybe you can hit something with your sling. That's not the same thing as leading an entire nation, David. David, I know you can talk to sheep, but can you lead people? Right? Different skill sets. So David, even if you wanted to ascend the throne right now, you'd be woefully inadequate. You don't have the skills, the practice, the things that you need to lead. You need to have some life experiences yet, David. And so one of those things I believe, and this is me, I didn't pull it out of the Bible, I was just thinking, I think he was learning to lead. I think one of the things that David had to do was he had 400 men gathered around him, and you got to lead 400 before you can lead an entire nation. And so he probably learned a few things about leading 400 people that really helped him out. He also had to learn how to face disappointment and adversity. And it's one thing to stumble with 400 people. Now you're leading an entire kingdom. And I remember my pastor telling me, Steph, it's a good thing for you to be a youth leader right now. It's a good thing for you to be the Sunday school teacher, whatever it would take. He said, those things are money in the bank, because if you ever are going to go further on in ministry, you need to be underneath the umbrella of some protection, of some authority figure, because you don't want to be dealing with parents. You don't want to be dealing with saints that are disgruntled that could have eternal consequences. He said, you want to learn how to deal with, and I don't want to say inconsequential things. Being a youth leader, you're dealing with a lot, trust me. But you want to be under my protection. And I so value that advice that he gave me back then, because there's so much to learn about people, about the church, about coming and going before people. And you just really do need that protection and covering that I think our pastoral staff does so well with our leadership team. I slid it in pretty good, didn't I? That was a good one. So the second thing, and this might be a little stretch, but I think David was a man of action. I don't think he dilly-dallied. There's a bear that's coming. The dude didn't wait for 2 or 3 sheep to be drug off. He probably was looking at the tracks where the bear was at, and he probably slew that bear. Same thing with a lion. And with Goliath, he didn't sit back and calculate like the angle. He was incensed. And so he went up there, grabbed his stones, and he went out there, and he took care of business. So I think David was a man of action. And although that is a good quality of leadership, it also can be an albatross or a weight around your neck, because not every confrontation needs you to drill it with a hammer like that, David. Sometimes you need to step back, and maybe action isn't what you need to be doing as a leader. Maybe, David, like there's unintended consequences for some actions, and you need to think those things through. Now, let me give you an example in the natural world. The Yellowstone National Park, there's something called an apex predator. That's the top of the food chain. And back in the 20s and 30s, the wolves were taking out the cattle. They were killing elk. And so there was pressure to remove that apex predator from that ecosystem. So they did, and they were very successful. Well, one of the things they didn't anticipate is now there was no check on the elk. And the elk blossomed. There's more elk than you can shake a stick at. And elk like to eat. And elk ate all the trees, the aspens and the cottonwoods. And without the aspens and cottonwoods, the little beavers couldn't make their dams. And without the beavers making their dams, there was no water flow short. Dams hold up the water. And so now the water would flow, and erosion was taking place and killing the ecosystem. So they didn't anticipate that when they took out the wolves. Now, that is an unintended consequence. And in leadership, I think you need to develop probably your group of counselors that help you out. There's times for quick decisions, but then there's times to rally together and say, all right, if we do this, what's this? And what's this? And one example I was thinking about with David, and man, this is still a hot button today. David decided that the capital of Israel and the spiritual capital of Israel, because he brought the ark home, was going to be Jerusalem. We're still fighting and rendering decisions and hearing it in the news today. And so that decision that David made, that policy decision that he made back how many thousands of years, has consequences felt even today. And so, again, I think one of those things that David had to learn, David, you got the hammer down, but can you step back, and do you have to make every decision right now? And is there some time for you to think some things through? And I think a good leader has a balance of both. My second point, and I think if anybody knows me close, they've probably heard me say this dozens of times. Waiting means you're doing something. Waiting doesn't mean you're sitting on the couch waiting. It means you're busying yourself. I call it doing the right thing, doing what's right in front of you. In other words, I got a hand right here. What has God put in front of me that needs to get done? While I'm waiting to figure out what the big picture is, I've got to busy myself doing what needs to get done. And I think David did that. Because David was anointed king. He didn't stop playing the harp. He didn't stop being the armor bearer. All those responsibilities that he was given, he didn't just fold up and walk away, because that's not what a king does. Now, he was faithful in doing those things that God had put in front of him, so that when the time comes for the opportunity for him to become king, he has prepared himself. And so oftentimes people will find their purpose in their doing. And I remember once driving on campus, I work at SIUE, and this song by Matthew West, I'm not gonna sing it, but it's called Do Something. Now, just listen to this verse, because it slapped me upside the head. I woke up this morning, I saw a world full of trouble now, thought how we'd ever get so far down, how it ever is gonna turn around. So I turned my eyes to heaven, and I thought, God, why don't you do something? This reminds me of Brother Dugas. Well, I just couldn't bear it. Not that Brother Dugas is saying that. The response I'm gonna get is Brother Dugas. Well, I just couldn't bear the thought of people living in poverty, children sold into slavery. The thought disgusted me. So I shook my fist to heaven and I said, God, why aren't you doing something? He said, I did. I created you. And I can hear Brother Dugas, just roll your sleeves up, getting busy, right? You're right, there are problems all around us, and that's why he created us. We're his body, his hands, his feet. And so these issues, he's left in our hands. And so that song slapped me upside the head. I called my son, and I said, Nate, dude, what are we doing? We need to get about our Father's business. And so we had a great conversation. And James talks about, like, if you don't know what that is, and I'm just throwing it out there because this is a message for me, this scripture's for me. I don't know, God. I mean, there's so much to do. What should I busy myself doing? Listen to this one. Religion that God our Father accepts is pure and faultless. So if you want to do something for God, guaranteed you're going to be in his will. To look after orphans and widows in their distress. Wow. Do we have orphans? It might not be an orphan, but there might be people out there that need a parent figure in their life. And what about widows? Who are the widows in our life? And then the other part of this is to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So what a challenge. I mean, all of us probably can think of a widow or an orphan in our life. And again, this will keep us busying ourselves, right? We could stay busy in the Lord's will and with all those responsibilities. And in doing that, I really do believe that you just might find your purpose. And so again, I'm speaking for myself. And so my third point, during his time of waiting, David was able to hang on to that clear promise. Because it wasn't like he ate pizza and had this thought. I mean, God spoke to David in a very clear way. In fact, he was doused from head to toe with oil. That was a point in time where he had an encounter. And so in the back of David's head, he could not deny what had happened to him. That God would someday make him king. And I have to believe that thought kept him going. And it was confirmed not just by like spiritual, because the leader Samuel confirmed it with him, and that's important. But other people, like the king, Saul's son, Jonathan, recognized that David's life was leading to the throne as well. And so Isaiah 40:31 says, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles, and they will run and not grow weary, and they will walk and not faint. So, hope is related to this idea of purpose. Hope, what you're hoping in, he had a promise that he could hope in. Hope does this by reinforcing that our life, including the trials and tribulations that we're going through in this world, that our life really does have meaning. There's a purpose behind all this. And there's a research study. It came out in 2025. And this would be out of Mizzou, the psychology department of Mizzou. And its title is Hope is the Key to a Meaningful Life. And they looked at 6 studies with more than 2,300 participants, and they analyzed a range of emotions like amusement, contentment, excitement, and happiness. And the findings consistently demonstrated that only hope consistently predicted a stronger sense of meaning. In other words, what do I say by meaning? You're not just a piece of plasma. You're on this world for a purpose. God has a plan for you. You're special. You do make a difference. That's a sense of meaning, a sense of agency. There's people that float around this world that think, if I don't show up, it doesn't make a difference. Well, I'm not one of those. Not because I'm conceited, because God put into me his spirit, and I believe. I've got hope. And when I'm disappointed, when I don't seem to fit in, when things aren't going my way, what keeps me getting back up? It's the sense that I know who he is and what he's invested in me. It has nothing to do with my goodness. It's everything to do with him, and I've got hope. So experiencing meaning is central. And when things feel bleak, it's important to remember that nothing is permanent. Situations can change, and hope begins with the belief that they will. So I think intricately associated with your hope is knowing your purpose, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think about these 2 kings. I think about David. He's got hope and a promise. He's got a will to live. I mean, he's been chased around. He spit out his mouth, pretended he was a fool in front of a king's. But he got back up. He encouraged himself. He withheld actions. He didn't lash out. All right, so this is David. Contrast that. I don't know if I'd like to hang around Saul. Saul seems to me like one of these control freaks that's trying to control everything. And if you don't do it just the way they want, they get very angry and they yell a lot. And they have a lot of despair and angst in their soul. And they're desperate. And they set in meetings when things don't go their way, they're clawing to maintain control. And they might even do some things that are embarrassing to try to get that control back. Now, if I'm honest, I wish I could tell you I'm a David all the time. I can see myself in meetings. I can see myself in social situations. I can see myself being too much of a Saul. And I think what David does for me is it reminds me that there's another way. It's in his hands. If it's going to be, he'll make it come to pass. And I don't need to claw. I don't need to fight. I don't need to fuss, because it's in his plans. So my 4th point, David did not become king by himself. Yeah, David had 400 people beside him. But more importantly than those 400 people, I think David had a close friend called Jonathan. And Jonathan breathed into him, believed in him. Jonathan was loyal. 1 Samuel 20. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord call David's enemies to account." And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, and because he loved him as he loved himself. Everybody, I don't care if you are the top of XYZ Bank of America, to the lowest. We need a friend and people to believe in them. You know who my champion was? My mom. I could do anything. My mom believed in me. She spoke life into me. Now, she didn't always make sense, right? Okay, Mom said, you know, Steph, you ever notice that these country and Western singers, They got these kind of slanty eyes. They kind of look like this. He said, you kind of got slanty eyes. I think you're going to be a great singer. Mom, I love you. Mom, I love you, but I'm not a singer. But she believed in me, and she made me believe that I could do anything. And you think about Moses. He's lifting up his arms. He had an Aaron and a Hur coming beside him. You think about, like Galatians talks about carrying each other's burdens, and in this way you're going to fulfill the law of Christ. That support that we need in difficult times. What about counsel and wisdom? I mean, sometimes, I was talking to my good friend Terry and Cindy, and I said, when I was 25, I pretty much knew how to raise kids. I could tell you everything you needed to do. And as I get older, it's like, yeah, I still believe some of the same things, but it's not as black and white as that. It's like, it gets pretty complicated, and I need to talk to somebody about this. Not you, Hannah. You're perfect. So Proverbs talks about without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. So I think it was either Brother Shock or one of our leadership members, and it was so profound because I never verbalized it this way, but they said, you need to find somebody that gets you. Now, for me, that's profound because I just think in a certain way, and I need to connect with somebody that thinks like me. I'm not talking agree, but somebody that gets me. And it's crucial in your life because in that space, you don't have to try to be understood. You just are understood. You just connect, right? You have a deep validation. There is this confidence that you get. Your stress goes down. It's a safe place to be vulnerable. I'm valued. I need a place to be valued. And there's people that are your people. And you know who your people are, right? You think about it. These are my people. Now, my people aren't your people. They don't have to be. But you need to find a people. Right? And that, my friend, is going to take you through so many trials and tribulations. And David found that, I believe, in his buddy Jonathan. My last point, when I wrap things up, even though David knew God's promise to him, he waited for the right time. And there's a couple elements underneath this. And on 2 occasions, David could have taken matters in his own hands. And we know that he had an opportunity when Saul went into the cave, said to relieve himself, going to the restroom. David was way back there, and they could have skewered Saul with his king garb around his ankles, and Saul would have been dead. There was another time when Saul took a nap, and he was asleep, and David found him. In both occasions, his men encouraged him. This is God's will. Look, God delivered him in your hands. He even had support from the crowd. Do it, David, take him. At the very least, put him in shackles, man. Get this guy out of our hair. We can be done with this. And David didn't fall for that. Now, think about this, not in terms of David, but think of this about opportunities. Like, you deserve that position. You're so much smarter. Let's put it this way. Of course it should be me, right? I've got school, education, blah, 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 blah. I should have that position, but it would be, right? And think about what happens to people when you're put in a position too soon. It can be devastating, and I've seen it happen. And you can be put in a position too soon in a couple of ways. One of them is you can pursue it naively. You might think you want that position, but you haven't really thought about it because you really don't want it, right? And I use this as an example. My dad was a World War II vet. He fought in the South Pacific. He was a Marine. And my dad told me very few stories about his time in the South Pacific, but this is one of them he told me. He said, man, Steph, he said, there was this Marine Raiders group that was going to come out. Now, this is before Special Forces. The Marine Raiders were the first Special Forces. And my dad said, I tried out for them. Now, he was 17, 18. He said, I wanted to be one of those raiders, and they cut me because I had flat feet. I couldn't physically, my feet wouldn't let me do it. He said, I was so disappointed. He said, until like 6 months later, and you looked around, and there weren't many of those people left. He said he was pretty happy he didn't get picked, all right? He had this naive sense of what war was, this naive sense of what it meant to be in the battle. Now he's in the battle, and he realizes this isn't what it really is all cooked up to be. I'm glad I wasn't one of those people, all right? And so sometimes leadership, you can be put in positions because you have a naive belief about what it is, and you strive to put yourself there. In other cases, and I think it's just as devastating, people can push people too soon. And I've seen it happen. And we all know of examples of, like in the ministry, Timothy and Titus talk very clearly about blameless, temperate, hospitable, and good managers of their family. And you've got these people that haven't, for example, you don't have financial 101, budgeting 101 down. And you're stuck in this position with a lot of tithes and offerings. And you don't even know how to handle some of your own little might. And all of a sudden you got all this money coming in, and you wonder why these people stumble. Because they were put in there way too soon. They didn't know how to handle affluence. Same thing happens with your NBA All-Stars when they make their millions of dollars. They can squander it. You get stuff too soon before you're able to handle it. And so again, that's one of those devastating things that happen when you're elevated too quickly. The story of David also demonstrates, though, how you accomplish something. It's how you accomplish something that's just as important, or probably more important, than what you accomplish. And so although David eventually would become king, it's how he got to the throne that was just as, or probably more important than getting to the throne itself. And how do I know that? I know that because David wanted to bring the ark to Jerusalem. His heart was pure, but he didn't do it the right way, God's way, and a good man died because the ark fell, and he was done. So God's way of thinking the right way and our way of thinking the right way aren't necessarily always in alignment. And so you need to spend some time figuring out what God's way is as you're ascending to positions of leadership. So this brings me home to my last couple minutes. And I won't keep us beyond 45 because I know that Brother Hoffy is waiting. Point number one, waiting isn't a bad thing. What is God trying to develop in you? As you're waiting for that promise, what is God trying to develop in you? Point two, David teaches us that waiting entails doing what is right in front of you. What opportunities do you have to be involved in the kingdom that are right in front of you? While you're waiting for that big reveal from God or that answer to your promise, what's right in front of you that we could busy ourselves right now? Point four, David did not become king on his own. Well, what are you doing to help others recognize you're serious about God's promise in your life? Jonathan believed in David because Jonathan